Hello and welcome to today's class. My name is Anne Carubio. I'm from the School of Social Sciences, the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication. And today we are looking at the unit DJL1209, Editing, Layout and Design. The topics we are covering under this unit will be introduction, the introductory bit, and the editorial production. Or the purpose of this particular unit, it is because in communication, we are always told image matters. So in whatever area that you deal with, when it comes to communication, people will always emphasize on the need for image. That the same applies to print media. Still, as a channel of communication, print media, the way people perceive, not in terms of it as a channel of communication, but in terms of how it looks, the physical look of a newspaper, the physical look of a magazine matters. Hence the need for the unit that teaches you not just how to write, but when you're done writing, how are you supposed to present your work in a newspaper, in a magazine, that makes it appealing to your potential reader. So this unit, Editing, Layout and Design, especially is meant for print media. So we'll start by defining what editing is, then look at what layout and design are also about, and move on from there. So editing is said to be, editing is making revisions to the contents of a document, the contents of a story, where you correct not only the grammar, not only the spelling mistakes, but you're trying to see whether the content that you have, first of all, is it applicable to your target audience? Is it content that has been verified? That is, content that is factual, content that is accurate, the organization and the structure of the content, has it been arranged in a way that makes it appear visually convincing and visually attractive to the person that is going to be reading your work. So when you edit, you're making revisions, but you're not just doing it, like I said, because somebody has some typos. That's actually, it is something that is important, yes, but it is not actually the key factor of why we edit. In communication, in journalism, we are especially editing because we need to ensure the structure of the document being presented to the people from the pages of the newspaper and the pages of the magazines it does meet the standards of and the qualities of a newspaper look and the qualities of a magazine look. So when you edit, you make revisions, you look at, have I given them accurate information, or is it something that maybe goes on to defame somebody? Am I using accurate language? Am I being too simplistic or too technical in the language and the content that I use to the people? So somebody has already done the writing. Mine is maybe to correct or to revise the document so it meets the standards of our particular newspaper or our magazine, conforms to the structure of that newspaper, and importantly, works on the accuracy and clarity of the content. Then with layout, why is it important for people to focus on layout and design? Some people tend to use the two terms interchangeably, but then in as much as they share something in common, you're told with design, we often design involves creating content for the newspaper, creating content for the magazine. But then when we move to layout, you're looking at how do I now arrange this content to fit a particular page or to suit a particular section of the newspaper. So we always have creation as the distinct difference between layout and design. So we say layout is the arrangement of predetermined items on a page. But design, you have to create. You have to be able to come up with that content, be it the images, the structure of the story, from where the headline goes to where the subheadline maybe comes, the rest of the story. How is it going to be arranged? Where am I going to insert the the pictures or the images if I have them? That is design. So I need to be the one that creates. Am I going to do an illustration where maybe I use graphics, cartoon characters? Do I get a photo? Creativity. So I need to create what I put on a page. But with layout, we just focus on the arrangement. So once I've decided that I need a photo, or I need to just draw some illustrations. I need for my story to maybe cover 3/4 of a page. It should have a headline, it should have a subheadline. The layout focuses on, have I conformed to what I had in mind or what I was designing in my mind? So layout focuses on arrangement. Design focuses on creating that arrangement. And this is why you cannot separate layout and design. And now when we're doing this unit, we're calling it editing, layout, and design. You're editing for the reason of checking, did what I have in mind come together when I was finally looking at this content or having this content on my page? Did it all come together? So we edit to correct typos, okay, but that is very minimal. We edit because we need to ensure the layout is okay, it has a visual appeal. We edit because we need to get to be sure we've given accurate information, and we edit to check whether that person that was responsible for the design, even if that means it was me doing it, if I was the one responsible for the designing of the information that I'm now editing, did what I have in mind come together when it is finally on paper? So if I hold that page of a magazine to my face, if I hold up that newspaper, will I say I'm looking at exactly what I saw in my mind when I was trying to think of how the look of the paper was supposed to be like, or how the look of that magazine was supposed to be like? We've given a number of reasons why we do editing, because like I say, the unit is editing, layout, and design. So the first thing we ask after we define what editing is, after we define layout and design, is we ask, why edit? What is the need for editing? If at all I have given a reporter work, why should they bring it to me as an editor to go over the content? Again, I will emphasize on the fact that when it comes to journalism, we expect that your language should be up to the standards of communication, of what journalism is about. So while you are editing, in as much as you may just catch some typos and grammar errors along the way, that's not the major reason. So we'll expect the person that wrote the story has done their work in terms of correcting their own grammar. But we edit more so for the reasons given. So there is the trying to be accurate and verifying our content. You're told the one thing that separates journalism from propaganda is verification of information. If I cannot be able to attest to the truth, to the facts of the story that has been told, then I'm failing as an editor. So why the reporters or why other writers need to bring their work to me is because we need to check whether all of the information presented is accurate, and accuracy can only be determined by verification. So did the person that wrote the story take the time to check whether the sources of their story were accurate, whether they were even credible, whether they had the authority to give me the story that they were giving me before I could even begin to write it? So this separates accuracy and verification, separates journalism from propaganda. So the minute you give your work for editing or to an editor, they're looking to see, were you able to verify your stories, or am I going to have to throw them out because verification has not been done? Then the second reason is you're trying to match the content to the thought in your mind. Print media has one disadvantage that ironically can work to its advantage, because you're told print media, for the lack of having moving images, it cannot be able, or for a lot of people, it is not able to especially create visual images in their minds. So it takes a person who's good enough or he's creative enough to use certain choices of words in their writing to make a story come to life. How do I make you see? And I'm putting see in quotes. How do I make you see what I'm talking about just through something that I write down? On TV, this is easy. On social media pages, it is so easy because all I have to do is get the right footage, put it on TV, and you don't have to imagine what you're seeing. It is there for you to see for real. But when you have print media, the problem is I need to make you see. I need to take you to that place that I was in my mind when I wrote the story. So now as I'm editing, I'm trying to see, have the words that have been written down, is this content powerful enough to match the thought that the writer or the editor had in mind when they began writing the story or gave somebody the mandate to write the story. So the second reason we edit is I need to make sure that the written content matches the original thought in the minds of the person that wrote the story or created the story, whether that is me, the editor, or a different person. So you edit to ensure your readers can visually create mental images of the story that you tell based on how well you are able to convert your own mental images to words and then relay them to the public. Then the third reason why we edit is because we need to determine if the content is too technical or sometimes too simple for the target audience. So this is journalism. We're always talking about the audience. The media is nothing without their audience. So for every area that you're going to always focus on, as long as you're taking media studies, there's always going to be emphasis on the people that you're speaking to. Whether this is on radio or on TV or on print media, there's always emphasis on that person that you're talking to. And this is the person that we're calling our audience. Do I know them well enough to determine if the content of what it is that I am trying to relay to them or I want to relay to them, is it too technical for them to be able to understand? Assuming I'm designing a magazine that is meant for young kids, maybe it's for educative purposes or it is for just entertainment purposes, the instances of comic books. Am I certain if the content that is there has been shaped in such a way that it speaks to that little child as opposed to an adult? So you look at the ECD books that are currently there, the ones that are supposed to be helping our kids learn the competence-based curriculum. You look at the graphics that have been used there, they are simplified enough to allow a kid to know how do we do 1 + 1, just through the images and through the wordings that have been used. So the work of the editor in such a book, in such a magazine, is trying to determine, is the content there that is supposed to be teaching this little child how to do 1 + 1, one that they can actually be able to understand. So if I draw 2 balls and I'm showing that if I add this ball to this ball, just through something that I draw, it's going to give me an answer to a problem that has been noted there. Has it been done in a way that suggests this child will understand it, maybe within the first reading, or they will get it as soon as somebody guides them through it? So determined by, of course, who your audience is, we will be able to know whether your content is too technical or is too simple. Then the fourth reason is we are trying to get rid of course, the typos, like we said, and the grammatical errors. But I will emphasize that in journalism, this should be something that shouldn't be taken to the level of the editors. You are told as soon as you call yourself a communicator, more so somebody that is doing media studies, you're supposed to make sure that this is the first area of your work that you look at. But nevertheless, the editor is also tasked with trying to ensure that your work is free of typos, that your work does not have any grammatical errors. And the reason really is simple. You do not want to lose credibility or just that authority and the competence that you hold with your audience by having pages that don't look neat because of grammatical errors or any other typos that may appear. Now we ask, if that's why we edit, why then is design and layout important? Why does it matter? Why is it so important to sit, think about how my page looks to my target audience and what goes where in the structure of a newspaper, a book, or even maybe a magazine? And you are told, because print media is especially about people attempting to create visual images in their readers' minds. It is why it is so important to think about the design or to think about the layout of that page, the layout of a cover, the layout of a newspaper story, for example. So I'm trying to sell a story, not sell in terms of commercial value, but I'm trying to get you to be attracted to a story through how a page looks like, through how the arrangement of the story, the images together with the words look like on a page. And for that reason, then design becomes important. So you'll note under the first point, we've noted it is print media. And for that reason, you need to create visual images. So the minute I pick a book, for example, the look of that book from outside, does it attract me to want to read further on the content that is inside of the book, or am I put off by the way you have designed your book? The choice of colors, for example, where you've chosen to put the name of your book, where you've chosen to have the name of your author, does it all come together and give me a visual image of what the book's content may be about, or does it fail in that? So we design, we do the layout because we need people to go to that place that the writer or the author that is, or the editor, where that person was in their mind when they presented us with a certain look of a book, be it the cover or be it the inside pages, a magazine or even a newspaper. And then we're also told why design and layout matter so much in print media is because newspapers and magazines have to compete with radio and TV. And radio and TV are very interactive. They are interactive mediums of communication. So what makes then the newspaper, the magazine, to have an appeal? When you're looking at the fact that I can't be able to communicate with somebody that is speaking to me over the radio, that I can be able to sing along to something I hear over the radio, and that with TV, I can be able to not only sing along, I can be able to dance because I see people dancing, I can be able to do what TV is doing. How do I make print media rise to that level? I have to think about the look. I have to think about the design. That the beauty of TV is the visual audio. The beauty of radio is the audio bit. What is the beauty of print media? It will be design. It will be layout. So writers and editors are very careful then in trying to see how do we present our content to the people so that they're attracted to what we write by how we have presented it. It's sort of just you attempting to sell a bottle of very expensive perfume. But then you've just put, the way you've packaged it is in such a way that even if I tell you, for example, this packet of perfume or this bottle of perfume costs 1,000 shillings or 2,000 or 5,000, whatever the amount, that if I mention the amount, from the look of that bottle, how it has been packaged, you look at it and then you'll tell me, no way. Is this worth 5,000? Because it has been maybe packed in a brown box. It doesn't really have a label, maybe just some graphics poorly presented. So from the look, I'm not convinced that the contents of that perfume are worth 5,000. Yet maybe it's even worth more than 5,000. But the look of that, the presentation, the look of the way you have put it on a shelf somewhere doesn't convince me of their content. It is the same with print media. What will make me want to read the words that you've put on a book, the words that you've put on a magazine? So I'll think, how do I present the cover of the magazine? Which model am I going to use? What wording am I going to use for the stories that are in the magazine? Which one do I give priority so that it acts as my headline? This way, the minute somebody just glances on that magazine, just takes a very quick look on the magazine or the newspaper, they want to go out and buy it. They want to maybe borrow it from someone because they've been called, in quotes, they've been attracted to your content by your design, by your layout. Unfortunately, with print media, people may not have the patience they have with radio and with TV because it is not deemed a very interactive medium of communication. So like we said, it has a lot of competition from radio and TV that are more interactive than it. So your point of interaction then is your design, is your layout. Make the image that you want to present to me be the one that matters. Because from there onwards, I am now going to be interested in the words. But the words become meaningless to me if you cannot be able to make the content call out to me through the design and the layout that you use. And then you have why else people design and why else layout matters. You're told it is because print media suffers the delayed passing of information as a result of a concentrated media. When we talk of concentration of media ownership, you're talking about an instance where you have one giant media house that has various channels of communication. We will use maybe Nation Media. They have a newspaper, the Nation paper. They are online. They have their TV station, a radio station. Now I'm looking at the chance that I may get to buy the Nation paper tomorrow, if at all I watch their 9 p.m. news today. The paper tomorrow is just going to be a repetition of the content that I have watched on 9 p.m. If at all I'm just interested in news. So why should I then consume news and TV tonight at 9 p.m. and then go ahead and tomorrow buy their Nation newspaper? Yet I can almost tell you for a fact what is going to be their headline, what is going to be the key stories that they consider news. Why should I buy it? So as the editor of that paper, then you have the challenge of still trying to make your newspaper relevant to this person that is already accessing your other channels of communication, maybe the radio, maybe the newspaper. So the more the media becomes concentrated, the higher the chances that print media continues to be edged towards the disadvantaged side. So you need to maintain its relevance through the design, through the layout. It cannot be as immediate as radio or TV or the newspaper. When a story breaks, TV is there, radio is there, social media quickly gets there. But with the newspaper, because of the process of the presses, it has to wait for hours to give us that information. So why should I then buy your newspaper? What about it makes it really presentable to me, apart from maybe prestigious reasons, or that I'm buying it because I'm literate? Why else should I buy your paper? Even that person that wasn't interested in getting it, get their interest through your design, through your layout. You've passed through, or I have personally passed through newspaper stands or magazine stands, or even just a bookshop somewhere. You pass through and something about the cover of a book, something about the arrangement of the newspaper for that day makes you stop, go back, and want to see more about the content of that paper, and you eventually end up buying it. So that's why design matters. That is why layout matters. You cannot take it. You cannot take the two for granted. But now for that to be done, for editing to be possible, for layout and design to be possible, you have to look at what we call editorial production. Who's involved in getting all of this done? How is it even done in the first place? So editorial production focuses on, from that moment, we begin to write our stories. From the moment we decide, out of the 10 stories that we have, these are the 5 that we are going to use, I need to pick the 5, decide which one is a priority. So if it is a newspaper, for example, which one goes on page 1, which one goes on page 2, and then per story, decide the arrangement of each. That's what we are looking at under editorial production. And as we are moving along, you're mentioning terms like gatekeeping. But even before we get to that, note, on a daily basis, the media receives a lot of information, a lot of news stories that never get to be relayed to the public, all within the same day. So which ones do we choose to keep? Of course, conforming to the traditions and the practices of journalism. Which ones do we get to keep? If I have 10, like I said, and I only need 5 or 4, which 5 am I discarding? Which 5 am I going to keep with me? The 5 that I keep, there has to be an order of importance. So which one gets to be on page 1? And that one that gets to be on page 1, am I covering it on a full page, or is it just half the page of the first page? Then I decide from that one, this one goes to page 1. This is out of the 5 stories, this is the one that goes to page 1. What will be the headline of that story? What typefaces am I going to use? What is the typeface that type size that I'm going to use? Am I going to use an advertisement before or after the headline? Where do I place the ad? Now, editorial production focuses on all of that. Right from when we begin the morning and we say, this is the stories that we're going to run, and that this is why we are running them, and that this is the one that is going to be a priority. We are already doing editorial production. But for you to understand editorial production clearly, you have got to know the traditions of journalism. What helps to define a news story? 4 newspapers and 4 magazines, because the two are different. The newspaper one requires immediacy. The magazine one can afford to be delayed. What allows me to put this as a story in page 1 and not page 2 and not page 5? Why headline it like this? That's something that you need to know. But under editorial production, like I said, what we are interested in is the selection of the stories, which story gets to go where, and why we choose to put the story there. And in this process, the editorial production, we will always be mentioning the newsroom, because this is where it is all done. The journalists that are responsible for giving us the final product will be here. So if I was the reporter that went out to the field, got the story, I am here working on my story, ensuring that all of the information that I collected, because of course I didn't write it all from the field, I have managed to put it together so that I know, for example, if there is an interview, here is where the comments of the person that I interviewed are going to feature. Here is where I am going, or this is how I'm going to start my story. So in the newsroom, you find all of these journalists. There's going to be the reporter trying to put together his story, ensuring that he gets that quote just right, ensuring that he has verified all of the information before he passes the story to the editor. You're going to get people like editors and just other staff who work in the newsroom to give us the final newspaper the way it looks, to give us the final magazine the way it looks. So the bigger the channel of communication in print media, the more we will have members of staff within working towards making sure that that channel communicates to us in an applicable way. For example, because a magazine most of the time tends to be monthly, there's some that are bi-monthly, so after every 2 months. Because we tend to have that, you realize that for it to be the channel of communication and to give people proper information, the people working there might just be a little more than those in the newspaper. Not in terms of numbers, but in terms of the tasks that have to be allocated. With the magazine, the kind of photos that go in there require that we have sometimes a costume designer. They require that sometimes you have an expert that is an expert photographer, not just about anybody. So these ones make it possible to give us the quality photos we see in magazines and not necessarily in newspapers. The newspaper is meant to give us news. It is meant to give us content that speaks to us about issues that are immediate. The magazine has delayed content. We can afford to ask somebody to pause or do this for us because it lacks immediacy. So that kind of photographer may not necessarily be the same one that the newspaper is using, or sometimes they can use both depending on the purpose of the stories that are being written. But the newsroom is where now the editorial production begins to take place. The reporter assigned a story, checking on whether, when they finally put the story together, whether it is matching the intention of why they were even writing the story in the first place. The photographers are there, the editors are there, just to ensure that all of the content that is finally presented to the people is not just accurate, but it is presented in a way that confirms and conforms to the image of the newspaper and the image of the magazine. But note, for any person to be in the newsroom, and especially for them to be doing editing, they require sound knowledge of language, because it is this language that allows us to spot the faults within a document. And we talk about language. It is not just language, again, emphasizing on, not just language based on how well you know English. So we're saying your grammar is wrong or your typos are all over, but we're saying language in terms of, can you be able to tell whether your document has any legal loopholes? We've seen a lot of cases where a story has been published and later the media station or the journalist responsible is taken to court for defamation. So if I'm an editor, will I allow my organization to be sued for defamation, yet I was supposed to have done my job and edited the document that was given to me, say by a reporter, well enough to know it had a legal issue here. So we're not going to run it now. Maybe the story will have to wait, no matter how good it is, because it may land us in legal problems. Do I understand the language of the law of the media in Kenya? Do I understand the language of the people that I am targeting, so that again, I make my content suitable for them. We said we check for technicality, simplicity. When my content is finally out there to my audience, will they feel that this was not only written, but that somebody took the time to sit, look through the document and confirm that it was right for the people that were going to receive it. So editing, you must ensure that you have your language right, always spot on. And then, like I said at the beginning, anything that you do in communication or as a student of media studies, anything that you look at, whether PR, whether advertising, whether editing layout, anything that you focus on, we'll always ask you, do you know who your audience are? I gave you the example of the book that is written for that child that is joining kindergarten that does not know how to do 1 + 1. How do you do the graphics on that book? How do you present this book to them, the arrangement of that book? How has it been done up to the point where this child is able to understand, when I see a ball drawn like this and another one drawn like this with this sign, then it means I have to put this one ball and the next ball together to come up with the solution to the problem presented. Do you know who you're writing for? So that you know, for example, drawing simple graphics is what works for a CBC, the CBC curriculum for a child joining kindergarten, or maybe it doesn't work. If at all this is not the kind of curriculum that we're using, we go to the media, you're looking at who is my target audience, and again, focusing on the way I present my content, the look of my newspaper, the look of my magazine. Will it be able to sell the content of that newspaper to my target audience? I've given you the example of the Nairobian versus the Daily Nation, or the Nairobian maybe versus the Standard. If you look at just the design of both newspapers in Kenya, you'll realize that something about their target audience are even very different. The display of the images on the Nairobian is very different from the display of the images on the Daily Nation. So their design is different, their layout is different, because in as much as they are both forms of communication under print media, calling them newspapers, we are saying the audiences are different, and understanding that allows you to know what to edit, how to edit it, so that you finally are able to communicate with the people that you're calling your target audience. So we do the editing because we know who our audiences are, and we're trying to make sure that the design, the layout fits the audience that we have defined for that newspaper. We also edit, or the editor will also check, does the length of the story fit the page that has been assigned to it? How many words per page? So that in as much as I may not be interested in reading the exact words you've written, I just need to know if it is 3/4 of a page, will your words be able to fit the 3/4 of a page? So again, the length matters, because the layout of the arrangement of any story, combining the images together with the words, will always ensure, or is supposed to ensure, that it fits within the designated page. So I've told you have 2 pages. I've told you have half a page. It's 1 column. Can I compress all of the details so that I communicate everything that I need to relay to the public, but at the same time, ensure that that content fits within the space that has been allocated? So if you're giving me an obituary, for example, how many of them needs to fit in 1 page of the Kenyan newspaper, the way we normally have them, maybe every other day of the week? So I need for 10 obituaries, maybe passport size, to fit within this page. How do I present them? Am I supposed to put the colored ones together, the black and whites together, or do I throw them all over, just maybe blend them? When I do 10 as opposed to 12 or even 11, will they fit the page? And not only that, will they create a visual appeal to the person that is reading this? So the 10 maybe will balance the page. But if I do 11, the eye gets distracted or bothered by the arrangement for the inclusion of the 11th obituary. So you know I'm writing because the 10 not only fit the page, but they're also going to create balance that in turn gives a visual appeal. So editing, like we said, is not just done to get typos. There is more to it. And the minute you understand why you're doing it, it becomes really easy for you to be able to adapt to the needs of your audience, and for you to be able to communicate exactly what you wanted to your audience. And the people involved, we call them the team, the people involved in doing the editing, the layout, the design, they get the term gatekeepers like any other communication people, like any other person working in journalism. We're calling them gatekeepers. And they're gatekeepers because they determine what content we get access to and what content is withheld from the public because maybe the importance was not that high or it wasn't urgent for them to be told something at that particular time. As an editor, because we've said among the reasons you're doing editing is to determine whether your content fits the allocated space, when you are now being called a gatekeeper, you're supposed to know, I have 10 pages to fill. I have 100 stories to select from. These are the 20, the 30 that I will select because they have the urgency or they have the impact that I want. Out of the 20, this is the one that gets a photograph that covers half the page. This is the one that doesn't really get a photograph. This is one that could work with just 100 words as opposed to 300 words. So you are sifting your information. And this is why we're calling you, the reporters, the editors, the gatekeepers. Right from when you decided, under the editorial production, we said you have to select what goes into the newspaper on a daily basis. Right from when you started doing that, you've started gatekeeping. I have decided what I'm going to allow into today's paper and what I'm not going to allow. Then for every story, which one gets an image, how big of an image, is it colored, is it black and white? You're gatekeeping. Because finally, the product that people will have, this newspaper, this magazine, looks a particular way in terms of layout and design to fit the visual image that maybe an editor had in mind, but importantly, to fit the stories to the allocated pages that must be filled before it is released to the public. So you do gatekeeping, and this is why we call the media the gatekeepers. So who's involved in editing, layout, and design? You have the chief sub-editor, and often you're told this is the person who allocates the stories to sub-editors, and the sub-editors work under him, and it is this person that actually does the supervising. But the sub-editor also helps to select the incoming material, guides the sub-editors in terms of which story is important, which one is not important. But even as he's doing it, note we said the first thing, he allocates work to various sub-editors. You have got to know the strength of each of your sub-editor. This one is very good in checking issues to do with crime. This one is good in education matters. This one is good in politics. So don't assign a political story to somebody with no knowledge about how to write or even edit a political story, because they may not be able to know when something is defamatory. They may not be able to know when something has a legal problem or the language appropriate maybe for politics. So this is the boss when it comes to editing. They check, like we said, who do I give what particular story, because I know they're going to give me the story in a very powerful way. They're going to write it accurately. They're going to verify it. They're going to get away from legal problems. Who do I allocate? Which particular story? For what reason? And then you have the sub-editors. And these ones, of course, are going to be more than the chief editors. So the more the sub-editors or the more the stories, especially in varying fields, the more the sub-editors that you are going to find within that newsroom. And these ones are just there to look at the specific stories assigned to them, gather information on them, write about the story as long as they're relevant to the audience at that particular time. They're supposed to have a very analytical approach, because if I'm given the responsibility of go out there, cover this story, there's so many ways I could tell the story, but how do I choose to cover it? From which angle? So that when I'm now finally back in the newsroom, I'm seated trying to put together the comments from the newsmakers, the images that I have to use, if at all I'm using an image, trying to do how does my introduction look like, how does my body look like. When I am now focusing on that, I'm realizing I have all of the information required to be able to put together the story. So that again, I don't have the problem of, I'm finally back in my newsroom, I want to put together the story, but I realize there's information I am missing, because When I was out in the field, I didn't really analyze what I needed keenly to know. I'm missing out on some details. So that's why we're told they have an analytical approach to how they see things. And they try to condense as much as information as possible to fit the space they've been told will be allocated to a story. So if I tell you, your story will run for half a page, another one, yours will run for a full page, then it prepares you for how much information you need and how you're going to place it so that it fits the page that you have been told, it fits the half a page that you've been told. By the time you're giving that to your chief sub-editor, then they don't have a lot of work when it comes to just editing issues with the length, even though it's part of what it is that they're supposed to be doing. The third category, the third class of people you'll find in the team of the editors, editing, layout, and design would be your staff reporters. And these ones, again, just like with your sub-editors, they are especially about going out, collect information, come back, put your story together, pass it to a sub-editor who in turn passes it to an editor. So the sub-editor is not as busy on a daily basis out in the field getting information. This is especially the responsibility of the staff reporter. And you're always told the bigger the media station, the more you will have the staff reporters. Because these ones now, their job is, they don't have desk jobs that I'm just here to sit down today and have my time or maybe wait for stories to come my way. These are the people that are in the field on a daily basis, making it possible for us to read all of the stories from the various counties, for example, the various countries, internationally. These are the people responsible for that. So the staff reporters, they vary according to, the number varies according to how big or how small print media station is. So the bigger, the more they are, the smaller, the less that they're going to be. And then with the staff reporters, you can have, or we have two categories of staff reporters, two ways of looking at them. You could be a reporter who's specialized in a particular field. So I'm really good in just crime stories. I'm really good in just reporting about business stories. Somebody else is very good in business stories. That makes you what we call a beat reporter. So you're good in a particular field, or you're only allowed to cover a particular area. The word beat reporting, it is said to have been borrowed into journalism from the police industry, that the police are mandated to cover a certain area. For example, you're told, your responsibility as a cop is to just cover the, maybe this part of town. So you are assigned this particular town, you are assigned a particular county. That becomes your beat. So in journalism, we borrowed the term because we realized journalists, just like the police, were mandated sometimes with the responsibility of just covering a certain area physically. So if I'm covering Nakuru, it is just Nakuru town. If I'm covering another town, just that town. I don't go outside of that town to get information to pass on to my sub-editors or to my editors. That makes you a beat reporter. But you could also be a beat reporter because of the field of specialization. Like I say, this time I'm not limited by a physical area. I am limited to a certain field of specialization that I'm really good in. I'm a very good criminal crime stories reporter. So that makes me a beat journalist. But there are those that we call general journalists, meaning you can be able to cover any area of reporting or any area of any story that comes your way. If it is crime, I do it well. If it is education matters, political matters, you do it well. But the good thing with having reporters is that they're there on a daily basis on the ground to get you the stories that are of human interest, that are of public interest, which will later be scrutinized by how well they've been put together by the sub-editors before they are passed to the chief editor, who gives the okay for the story to go to the presses, including working on the structure, the organization, the layout of the paper, be it a magazine, be it a book, or a newspaper. Then you have the category called freelancers. And freelancers work just like reporters. They're there on a daily basis, but they're not assigned to a particular media station. So they're not told you always have to report to this station. Rather, they do their own independent work, and sometimes they will sell that work to the highest bidder. So they'll tell us, for example, or they'll go to the media and say, I have this story, how much are you willing to pay for it? And the good thing is, because this is something that they do as their profession and they do it as their job, they already know, or most of them already know through experience, through interaction with other reporters, which media station pays what, or pays how much, or to what extent, to what level, for what category of stories. So if I have a good story that is on crime, which station do I approach for this story to sell to them for the amount that I possibly could be seeking for? And note, they're also called stringers. So they're not tied to a particular media house. Rather, they just do independent work and then sell it to the highest bidder. And then you have the last category, that is correspondents. And these ones, they are retained by an organization when it cannot be able to have its own reporter in a certain geographical location. So the international media, for example, tends to keep a lot of correspondents in countries where they know they're bound to find stories to either write about, and in the case of broadcast media, report on. So they'll retain you as their journalist, maybe in Kenya, maybe in a certain region of Kenya, if at all you're looking at a Kenyan media, and then be paying you some retainer fee or have a special arrangement with you, but that we can now say you are tied to this media station, you are tied to this newspaper station because you're the one that gives us information. The only difference is we're not calling you our own member of staff. We don't have a permanent and pensionable kind of contract with you. So you only can be able to relay information to us from the locality in which you are for a certain amount of money agreed upon between you and the media station for a certain period of time. That's a correspondent. And collectively, they make it possible for us to have the information that we need to now have the structure. Because again, note here, we're calling the unit editing, layout, and design. All of these people, a correspondent maybe, may not really be responsible for the look of the story, but that they're giving us the content of the story. But note, in one way or the other, they have influenced the choice of the story that is to run in the newspaper or in the magazine for that day or for that month. So collectively, they form the team. Whether you're part of the content or part of looking at the images, you form the part of the team that is responsible for giving us the newspaper stories, from the story to the structure and all of that. Then you have the newspaper formats, because again, we said editing, layout, and design especially looks at print media. The most common and daily form of print media is a newspaper form, is the newspaper. So it is important to understand this paper that is running on a daily basis, its frequency is more than, say, that of a magazine or a book. How or what kind of formats are allowed or are applicable in the industry? The format is about the size of the page of the newspaper. And the size will always be dictated by a house style. For example, the media station's house style, how they would like their paper to look like when it is finally out there in the public. And there are three ways, or there are three formats that are commonly used when it comes to newspapers. You have the full format, or what we call the broadsheet. And it is normally the biggest in terms of size. It is the biggest size when it comes to the format of the newspaper. The UK newspapers are said to use this a lot, the full format. When I take the Kenyan newspaper and fold it in half, seen to be folded, especially vertically, and then you attempt to open it again. So it doesn't flip the way we normally have our newspapers flipping like this. Rather, it flips up. That's what you're calling the broadsheet. And you have a demonstration for that. So it is bigger than the newspaper that we commonly have in Kenya in terms of the size of the page, from which angle the newspaper is flipping from. That way, we have what we call a broadsheet. But you have now what we use in Kenya, which we call the tabloid newspaper. So it is normally half the size of the full format newspaper. So in terms of size, it is not as big as that of the broadsheet, and it can have 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 columns to allow for the stories that are going to be told or that are going to be written in a single day to fit within those allocated columns. So we've given an example of the Kenyan Daily Nation. So the look of the Daily Nation, if you compare that look to this one, the look of the Daily Nation is much smaller than the look of, say, the Daily Telegraph in the UK. And then the third category is now the magazine format, and this one is now much smaller to the newspaper. I'm sure if you've seen the look of a newspaper versus that of a magazine, the magazine page is much smaller than any newspaper's page. But this is, of course, determined by the fact that the magazine tends to speak to a very specific group of people. It is not as general in its interest as the newspaper, so we can afford to have a page that has just 1, 2, or maybe a maximum of 3 columns, because after all, we're talking about the same story within the same page. But with newspapers, often we'll find 3, 4, or even 5 stories, different ones, being told in the same page as long as they're within the same field. So this is a page allocated to political news, but not necessarily ones that are similar in content. But with a magazine, if we call it fashion, these pages are just for fashion alone. If we call it an agricultural magazine, the pages are just meant for agriculture. So we limit the size of the magazine because even in terms of the target audience and the issues it is dealing with, they're very specific. And there's only so much that we can talk about in relation to one particular topic. Your magazine is on fashion. If I make it 500 pages, how much information on fashion can I afford to pass for 500 pages every month? But if you get a newspaper, even for 100 pages, for example, given the content is varying, we would find a lot to fit within those pages because we are not limiting it to a particular topic or to a particular field. So these are the 3 major kinds of, or the major types of formats that we have under the newspaper formats. Allow me to conclude by again insisting that we are looking at a unit that focuses on image matters. In print media, you hear this a lot in public relations. You hear this a lot in TV, that how you present, whatever content that you have to present, will always determine whether you get the interest of the public or you don't. But we take it often for granted when it comes to print media. Yet it is this design, it is this layout that determines whether my eye is quickly attracted to something that I see or the news stand. It is what you write, okay, but then how have you presented it? Even if something major happens and then I present it using a headline that has so small, the type size is so small that is not even quite visible or is not visible from afar, how am I supposed to get the attention of somebody from that? So you have to learn that when it comes to print media, how what you have to write has been presented is what will determine whether people get to read what you have written. So your newspaper headline has been written, or the content is so important. It is important news, yes, but are you making it appear important by the type size, by the typeface that you're using that makes it call to me from afar? Like I said, it's a lot of times that we've passed by that newsstand but never get to stop and look at the content of the newspaper because there was nothing about it that called out to me. But maybe as I was passing, I saw an image of something on your front page of the newspaper, or I saw the image or by looking at the front page of the magazine, and I told myself I would like to know further what this book is about, what this magazine is about. So it makes me stop, go back, because your layout, your design got my attention. The pages we call boring on a newspaper, they're not boring because the content is boring per se. They may be boring because even before I read the content, there was nothing that was visually appealing about the content or the arrangement of that content and the pages of that newspaper or that magazine. So note, the reason we emphasize on editing, on layout or design in print media is because we will always say image matters. Whichever the channel of communication you're using, image will matter because it is that image that will determine whether you get readership for your content or you don't get readership for that content. So to produce quality pieces of writing for print media, you need to learn not only how to write, but how to edit the content that is there, how to give proper structure to your content, and that way you will definitely get an audience that is interested in reading your work every time you put it out there in the public domain. So take care of your wording, but importantly, take care of how you present that wording to the audience, because you don't have the luxury of using print media in an interactive manner the way radio or TV does it. I hope that is clear and that you have gotten something from that. And with that, I would wish to end our lesson. So thank you for listening to the content, and that's it.
These televised lectures supplement our robust online learning going on our MKU online platform. You can view more on our televised lectures via our online platform. We are in a digital era, and Mount Kenya University knows this. The following are the steps to follow so as to complete your online application. Download the application form from the website www.mku.ac.ke. Attach copies of your academic certificates and ID. Pay the application fees via M-Pesa pay bill number 270988. Your ID is the account number. 2,000 shillings is the charge for a postgraduate. You can also deposit in the bank accounts provided on the website. Then email all the above to apply@mku.ac.ke.